Nisemonogatari is the third of Monogatari's many parts, a story about fakes. It explores the idea of universal absolutes, of lies, and of course of the truth of what is real and what is fake. It introduces fan favourite characters and has some of the most creative directing in the series, and so today we will dive into all of that to explore the themes and messages of this amazing part. So if that sounds interesting to you, then strap in for the 8th video in this Monogatari arc analysis series, where we will explore the beauty that is Nisemonogatari's Karen B. So if you find yourself entertained at any point during the video, then consider liking, subscribing and ringing that bell. Anyway, on with the video. Karen B is the first of Nisemonogatari's 2 arcs, and despite its namesake, does not exactly revolve around the character of Aragi Karen. Oh, and just for my sake, I'll refer to Aragi Kaomi as Aragi in this video, and Karen and Tsukihi by their given names. And since this arc is a bit all over the place, this video will probably be a little more disjointed than the previous videos in the series, but okay, let's dive in. The arc opens with Aragi hatching from an egg. Obviously a bit of symbolism for the next arc, given Tsukihi being, a bird, but in this context it could also symbolise Aragi growing up, since as you will see, maturing and what it really means to grow up into an adult is a central idea to this arc. The scene turns to black and white as Senjougahara walks into frame. This might be because of how black and white this situation is. Senjougahara has detained Aragi and he is trapped. There is no grey to it. As far as Senjougahara is concerned, this is what is happening, and that is that. Or perhaps since Senjougahara's face is obscured in this scene, it could represent how Aragi cannot understand Senjougahara, her motives not fitting into his black and white view of the world. Or a third interpretation is that it is just foreshadowing for Kaiiki, since he is the root cause of basically all her actions in this arc. Senjougahara tells a lie. In other words, she has the courage to lie to her lover. And only when she makes a mistake, and only when Aragi points it out, does it become fake, aka truth and lies, real and fakes are a fluid thing, something that will become a lot more important later in the arc. Turns out Senjougahara is attempting to protect Aragi, hence why she, in an extreme way as ever, has chosen to keep him captive for his own safety, though from what, or should I say whom, we will have to wait and see. Flashing back, we get the introduction of the smaller of Aragi's little sisters, Tsukihi. Beyond illustrating Aragi's lack of trust for his younger sisters, this scene also brings up one of the core ideas of the overall part. When Aragi says it's not that he's worried, it's that he does not trust her. Tsukihi brings up the point both are just words, aka their inherent meaning isn't that important, aka there is no universal absolute truth to these words. A verbal spark commences and we get another interesting piece of dialogue. Tsukihi brings up that fighting is a valid form of communication if it's done the right way. Aragi agrees but counters that the way his sisters fight is the wrong way because it is violent, then says he refuses to believe that is the right way to fight. This setting up the central conflict of this arc between Aragi and his sisters. Is their approach to justice real? And to this Tsukihi replies she doesn't know anything. And Hanikawa contrasting aside for now, what this whole interaction spells out is that Tsukihi believes things like words and fights have differing meanings depending on the person and the situation, whereas Aragi believes things to have inherent and unchanging meanings. Trusting and worrying are different things, there's no which way about it to our protagonist, and although fighting can be communication, if it is violent, then it cannot be acknowledged as right. Aragi states his opinion as if it is a universal truth. But that scene is just a small taster for the later conflict of the arc, and we instead turn our attention to some spicy snake time, with Aragi phoning Sengoku up to see if it's a good time to come over to her place. Now in Aragi's view there is nothing sexual or romantic about this excursion, and if there is, he subconsciously is choosing to ignore it. Basically he is not seeing the truth of the situation, hence why his eyes are covered as he calls her. When he asks Tsukihi to go with him, she obviously says no. She knows exactly what Sengoku's intentions are, but of course Aragi still does not get it. We also get Tsukihi asking why he no longer spars with Karen. He says it's because she has gotten too strong, but as we all know his thinking is actually the opposite. He thinks he has gotten too strong and does not wish to hurt her. However, because this arc's all about differing perspectives and truths, Tsukihi sees it another way. She sees him no longer attacking his sisters as a sign of him growing up and leaving them behind, as maturity and growing up is once again a central theme of this arc. A classic Aragi assaulting Hajakuji scene commences, and although there's a lot of fun dialogue in this scene, the only thing I want to point out in particular is that when Hajakuji goes to leave, Aragi asks if she is going to disappear, just like Oshino did. It reveals a rarely seen side of Araki, one who genuinely felt hurt and saddened by Oshino's departure, and with a heavy hand of Monogatari foreshadowing, Hajakuji says she won't be going anytime soon. Now comes one of the most interesting scenes in the arc, the Sengoku playdate. This scene itself is some of the best visual storytelling in the series, even if it by design should make you feel a little uncomfortable. As well, Sengoku is feeling exactly the same way as we, the viewer, are. This scene in concept is one of contrast. We have cute little Sengoku in her sickly sweet room of pink, cute and girly youth. Yet her choice of attire and her actions instead portray the image of a far more mature woman, not interested in playing games but in seducing the man before her. They play family games, but this is not a family friendly scene. At the start of the scene, we see Sengoku greet Araki at the door. He compliments her wearing her bangs up. She says she would be too embarrassed to have it up like that outside. She's allowing Araki to take a peek at her true self, since her bangs act as a metaphorical shield for her true feelings. Her aim here being of course to draw him in, to entice him, to arouse him. Yet even when she spells this out to him in plain Japanese, he is oblivious. Next we learn her parents aren't in, and then Sengoku locks the door. Once again, the intentions of this scene are clear as day to us the viewer, but not to Araki. We get a little tease for Atari Monogatari, and well, to be honest, this entire scene is essentially just that. After that, she makes him sit on the bed and starts to remove her clothes, revealing an outfit that, well, doesn't really seem age appropriate. She tries to make Araki remove his own clothes. She is taking control of the scene. She is intentionally making provocative poses, in of course an attempt to gain his eye. Yet as Ahoge just blows in the wind limply, he has no interest in her advances, or he simply hasn't noticed them. She intentionally makes her words more adult, turning the king game into some kind of weird sex metaphor. She makes him play the game of life, which although innocent in its own right, can easily be seen as some strange fantasy of her and his future life together. Yet none of these attempts work, with Araki in his inner monologue saying he won't have any dirty thoughts, which as he says, is something Sengoku would appreciate. God is he dense. Oh, and then there is Twister. And I don't think I need to spell out that one for you. The scene ends with the appearance of Sengoku's mother. Sengoku, not able to be anything but her parents' perfect daughter in front of them, panics, not wanting to be labelled a pervert, another sign she is fully conscious of her actions in this scene. She falls atop Araki, maybe in a last ditch effort to grab his heartstrings, but clearly it was to no avail. Her game to try grab his affection ultimately failed, which in a way may even be to her benefit, given what Sengoku really wants is a one-sided love, but that's a topic for a video down the line. And with Sengoku's only contribution this arc over and done with, let's go ahead to the introduction of Araki's bigger little sister, Araki Karen, where we see her walking along on her hands without a care in the world. This prompts Araki to call her out for not acting her age, and she turns this back around onto him instead. And although this is very much a funny joke moment, it is also a lot more important as the basis for a very core idea to Araki in this arc. That idea being that Araki is the same as his sisters. Araki, despite his harsh critiques of his sisters, their actions and their vision of justice, is exactly the same. He believes they are childish because they are younger, that their sense of justice is naive, because again they are younger. However, as we will see across this arc, all these things are true of Araki himself. Even Senjougahara calls him a man of justice, because that is what he is, the guy sticking his neck out to save others. But the key difference in Araki's mind is that his sisters are just playing hero, whereas he is actually helping others, even though in reality he is just doing it for his own self-satisfaction and isn't helping anyone at all. Oh, and then after this we get Araki saying Kanbaru isn't actually a pervert, and her assaulting him to prove she is. And although like a lot of this arc this is basically just a comedy scene, the fact Kanbaru so adamantly defends her identity as a pervert is actually quite telling of her later character arc. Kanbaru also says that he needs to be careful girls don't take advantage of his kindness, which is one of the many times in this arc it is emphasised how popular Araki is with the ladies, another being Kanbaru's interesting prediction of his future wife and mistress situation. Kanbaru also exposes Araki's obliviousness in this scene, discussing the relationship between Hanikawa and Senjougahara that he just hadn't noticed, and the feelings Sengoku harbours for him that again he had not realised, which shows just how much he obfuscates given Kanbaru is not the smartest of characters. The last thing I want to point out during Araki's visit to the Kanbaru household is Araki asking Kanbaru how she hides her monkey paw from her family. Kanbaru explains there is a distance between her and her grandparents, so she just doesn't tell, ending off her answer by saying it's fine because she will be free of the oddity in a few years. This of course being a clear contrast of Araki's own situation. and like Kanbaru, he is close to his family, there is no distance, and unlike her, he will not just be freed from his vampirism in time. No, it's a lifelong commitment. The point being that this is a situation unique to Araki, and one he must deal with himself. As he leaves, we get the masterpiece that is Kaiiki's introduction. Now, there is just so much to unpack in this scene, but to be concise, Kaiiki's appearance is accompanied by death, by foreboding, by malice. The red backdrop of the scene makes the river appear like blood. The tree cast in shadow appears like sinister claws. In other words, the scene screams evil. And do remember whose eyes we are seeing these events through: Araki's. As made clear later in this arc, Araki's view on justice and evil are pretty black and white, and as such Kaiiki, someone who Araki would see as evil, is cast in the most evil and ominous of ways, almost to a cartoony effect. Which is funny when all Kaiiki really says in this scene is that he is looking for Kanbaru, hardly a nefarious action, and well, as we learn in later parts, he was doing this out of nothing but care for Kanbaru, having been a close friend of her mother. Kaiiki wasn't doing anything evil, not at all, but he is still cast in an over-the-top evil light, because that is what Araki sees, and because of that is what we the viewers come to see him as. The river in this scene acts as a physical divide between the two, the sapling and the dead tree, because Araki sees him as evil and himself as justice, though in reality they are less opposites and more like two sides of the same coin. But we will talk more about these two once Kaiiki re-enters the story. Araki's kidnapping comes soon after, bringing us back to the start of the arc. Senjougahara going on to replicate her assault of Araki from Hitagi Crab, but as a sign of her moving on, instead of a stapler she used her hand. She has no need for her stationary defensive weapons anymore. And weirdly enough, throughout this scene, Senjougahara again brings up the fact Araki is liked by many, which is why I think Kanbaru kept bringing up this idea earlier in the arc, because it was foreshadowing for this scene. As why does Senjougahara say this? Why be so focused on what others think of Araki? Well, because she is scared of losing him. This being compounded on by Araki spilling Kaiiki's presence in the town. Senjougahara, remember, had lost her mother, and due to the circumstances of her past, now rarely sees her workaholic father. So losing the only other person she loved, be it another woman or to the conman who split up her family to begin with, understandably scared her. Senjougahara, despite her harsh exterior, much like a crab, is still soft on the inside, and so she is dealing with her feelings for Araki, her fears, in the only way she knew how, through violence. Though she has changed. Instead of using a stapler, she used her fingers. Even if she's not quite there yet, she is still recovering. But when Araki gets a call, he breaks free of his restraints. The reason being his sister asked for help. He was scared earlier in the arc of hurting his sisters due to his vampirism, but now uses it to break free in order to save his sisters. A symbol showing that this affliction of his has two sides. It can be seen as a danger or as a protector. Like a lot of things in this arc, it's all up to perspective. And funny enough, when he gets home, he is ready to hit Karen due to what he perceives as stupidity in not relying on him. Even though, he didn't want to fight her because he was scared he'd seriously hurt her. Hanekawa interjects, saying in quite a lot of words that he acts differently around his sisters, and that this version of him doesn't fit with her vision of him. Yet another example of differing perspectives and multiple truths, as the Araki Hanekawa knows and the one she is seeing here are both true. It's just that he doesn't show every side of himself all at once. People are not black or white, even if Araki wants them to be. Araki goes on to school his sisters in the ways of justice, or well, what he himself perceives as justice. Karen declared that she was right, and as such that justified her actions. However, Araki instead argues that the strong are justified. Thinking you are right isn't enough, you need the strength to enact your justice. Otherwise it's just a game, you are just playing hero, not being a hero. Because a hero attains results with their own strength, one lacking strength is just a fake, and as such, in Araki's views, does not dish out any true justice. This may even be why he goes to hit Karen, since in his view the correct are the strong, and so he seeks to prove his way is right and Karen's is wrong through a literal showing of the difference in their respective strengths, this being foreshadowed for their eventual showdown later in the arc. Karen, though, due to her view of justice not being dependent on strength, replies to the fact she wouldn't be able to hit him back by saying she would bite instead. She will find a way to win even if she is weaker, because the truly just win even if they are weaker, because they are just. Hanekawa, though, points out his harshness on his sisters comes from his own harshness directed at himself. This of course being some standard Araki self-hate, which he can externalise onto his sisters, since they think like him. They see the world in black and white just like him. The only difference is that he doesn't think they are strong enough to be true heroes and they think they are. Araki, in a bit of self-awareness, admitted that we need to accept our weakness, which transitions nicely into his bath time fun with Shinobu. This scene of course being about the reconciliation of the two, not due to any forgiveness on either side, but because it is the best way to move forward. It's in their best self-interests. This whole scene being framed in quite an almost romantic light, with the red flower petals and the two embracing at the scene's close. However, there is also a clear sense of animosity towards each other, even if it's now under the surface. It's a contrasting presentation, perfectly reflecting their unique relationship. The fact both are naked in this scene is also quite telling. It shows vulnerability. They both have opened themselves up to one another completely, a sign of their reconciliation. In this scene, we also get another bit of emphasis on Araki growing up, with Tsukihi saying as such when he asks her to knock when he is in the bath. This of course also being a reference to how his vampiric affliction is a metaphor for him growing up into an adult and coming of age. As well, usually you ask your family to knock because you know you are growing up and have a new desire for privacy as a result of puberty, but in the case of the story it is because of Shinobu. But Shinobu stuff aside, a key piece of information brought to light in this scene is the identity of the oddity that has afflicted Karen, the fiery bee, which as we learn is a fictional oddity that never existed. But in keeping with this part's themes on lies and fakes, the fact they believe Karen is cursed is exactly why she is cursed. Believe in it and it shall come true. A fake can be even more dangerous than the real thing. In the following scene, we see Araki break his promise to Hanikawa to not get angry at his sisters by, you guessed it, getting angry at his sisters. Another example of Araki's mindset that he can do what he wants if he has the strength to, and since Hanikawa ain't around to tell him off, he can do what he likes. Oh, and bird foreshadowing. After this comes possibly my favourite scene in the entirety of Nisemonogatari, the showdown between Karen and Kaiiki, the childish young tree and the old dead tree. The whole scene is packed with symbolism and the philosophies of the two characters, so if I miss anything I do apologise. But in general, this scene is framed much like the previous scene, with Kaiiki as very black and white, hence the block black and white of the scene with no grey in between, because both in Karen's view of things and well Araki, since he is retelling what Karen told him, Kaiiki is evil, his black and white morality once again. The way the walls become screens showing either Kaiki's eyes or the subject of his dialogue shows clear as day that he is in control of the scene. Karen is being watched from all sides, she is unable to do anything, with him knowing she is powerless atop his palm. Karen came with no plan. All she wanted to do was stop Kaiiki, but the only way she knew to achieve this was violence. But it was fine because she was on the side of justice and Kaiiki sided with evil. According to her view of justice, she would be victorious because she was right and Kaiiki was wrong. But Kaiiki squashes this naive notion of justice almost immediately, because he frankly does not care. Right and wrong don't work on someone who considers neither your actions good or his own bad. Honest emotions in the real world don't achieve much, so Kaiiki sees no use in them, no value, and as such Karen's emotional dialogue might as well be empty air. He appreciates Hanikawa's swindle in setting up this meeting, also hinting at her supernatural nature, something I believe is not a reference to Black Hanikawa as such, but to her inhuman approach to her problems, splitting them off from her heart in the form of oddities. But foreshadowing aside, unlike Hanikawa's scheme, he has nothing but boredom when faced with Karen, saying she will punch him and then kick him. When Karen asks why he does what he does, he explains it clearly. He just gives the kids what they want. He doesn't hide his nature as a con man, nor is he ashamed. He is not the villain Karen was looking for at all. Every sound argument he makes, such as how he's only selling a product and it's up to the customer how they use it, is met with nothing but emotion from Karen. No real rebuttal, just anger. Her justice only knows how to talk in actions. As soon as the evil raises logical points, as soon as they act and talk like not a villain but a human being, that's when Karen's justice falls apart. He is a very normal guy in a very abstract show, shown by nothing better than his motive, money. He isn't evil at heart. He doesn't scam people because he enjoys it. He does it because it is the easiest way for him to achieve his goal of money. If there was an easier way, I'm certain he'd jack in his conman ways and go for that instead. Being motivated by money, as Kaiiki himself states, is the most normal and understandable of motives, because money makes the world go round. His advice to Karen is that she is a fool for coming there for free. However, Karen, be it in childish ignorance as Araki would see it, or due to her true righteous heart, spits back at his talk of money, her flames of justice literally burning away at the money, as she puts her justice before money, something which in a way makes her a child, at least in Kaiiki's view. When she calls him out for selling to children and still claiming to be an adult, he simply replies that yes, he is an adult. The fact he can sell to children as a conman is exactly what makes him an adult. One who understands themselves completely, who doesn't need to cling to notions of justice or ideals to dictate and justify their actions. The complete opposite of Aragi, at least at this point in the story. As Kaiiki explains, her filling her heart with good deeds is no different from him filling his wallet with so-called evil ones. They're both just using others to fulfill themselves. In the end, she makes people happy through her deeds, and he uses money to benefit the economy. Every problem can in theory be solved by being right, but every problem can be solved realistically with money. He can only operate as a conman because people place value in their money. Unlike justice, everyone uses and values money, and as such it begs the question, is money not the true justice? Because unlike right and wrong, it is something everybody understands, everybody uses, everybody sees the value in. It all comes down to what one values and places importance on. The moment you don't care about ideals, then good or evil, it no longer matters. Kaiiki completely tears down all of Karen's beliefs and ideals, and even uses them against her. As if not for her childish imagination, the bee would not have been nearly as effective. The black and white turned to black and yellow, a show of how easy it was for Kaiiki to manipulate her, turning her rigid view of black and white into nothing but a fuel for his imaginary oddity. And then he robs her, because money makes the world go round. She wasted his precious time with her talk of justice, so this is just what it cost her. That's how the adult world works, and even if she is a kid, she put her foot into it. Subsequent to this scene, we get a conversation between Hanekawa and Aragi, where the latter says how he expects Oshino will come and save the day as usual, something which, as we know, does not happen. Aragi has yet to come to this realization that he must face things himself, perfectly symbolised by the problem of this arc not being an oddity at all, but a middle-aged conman with a fake bee who folds to the first prospect of resistance. If Oshino and the oddities represent a more fantastical way of addressing your issues, then Kaiiki represents the cold truth of reality. Not every problem can simply be exercised, and well, even in Monogatari, simply exercising the oddities did not solve any issues. It's just that Araki saw it that way, and so now having to face a normal ass guy like Kaiiki, he needs to concoct an image of an evil villain to understand things, to comprehend things. Now there is no handy oddity to act as a metaphor for the problem. Karen later brings up to Aragi that in the same situation he would have done the same as her. She knew he saved Sengoku, so added on that if he knew there were more victims out there, he would have gone to save them too. Which in all honesty is Karen overestimating her brother, since as we know, he did know about another victim, and in a way let that victim suffer. Of course there were understandable circumstances, but Karen and by extension Aragi also don't see things that grey. It's black and white for the two. Which could be another reason Araki is so critical of Karen's justice, because he knows her justice burns brighter than his own. We once again get the idea of adulthood brought up, and to contrast Kaiiki's previous statement on what it means to be an adult, Araki states that growing up means not letting those around you suffer. In other words, Araki associates taking the burden of others onto yourself as being an adult, which makes a lot of sense when you look at his entire character as a whole, as what makes him come of age and become an adult in the end is, if anything, the complete opposite, not burdening himself with the problems of others for the sake of his hero complex, but instead self-reflecting and coming to value his own burdens just as much, having the strength to take others' burdens. The thing that makes Araki so immature is what he preaches as a sign of adulthood, and so in line with this immature way of thinking, he literally takes on Karen's burden by sucking out some of the bee's venom and inflicting himself with it. He is preventing her from taking responsibility for her own actions. In other words, Kaiiki would not approve. Through his talk with Hajakuji, we get a bit more of Araki's complete lack of any self-perspective. Hajakuji says his sisters are idiotic like him, setting up the scene as one just as much about Araki as it is about his sisters. So when he says he agrees with their motive but says they are too reckless in pursuit of a justice they are too weak to achieve, well, that's the exact same way others see him. Hajakuji even says as much herself, adding that if he was not like that, she and the other Bake girls would not have been saved. This being the first time in this arc he starts to understand the truth. All the funnier when it is the literal never aging child that has to explain this to him. He counters saying while they are still kids, he needs to guide them, protect them. Him once more conflating adulthood with protecting others and taking on their burdens. And once again the question of adulthood comes in, with Araki asking Hajakuji what makes you an adult, and Hajakuji rightly replies that someone asking that question most certainly isn't one. In the next scene we see Senjougahara arming herself with pencils in preparation for meeting with Kaiiki, this being a very telling scene of her feelings towards him. Before his name had come up, she had abandoned her stationery as I mentioned earlier, but now she is rearming. He is threatening to undo all the progress she made up until this point. The fact she also kept hold of his business card, never throwing it away, is also a clear sign of how much he has affected her life. A constant shadow she can never be rid of. I mean, even when he is not present, his ominous theme still plays over the scene. Classic hypocrite Araragi also makes an appearance, saying it's insane that Senjougahara is trying to deal with Kaiiki for his sake, as if taking on others' burdens isn't his MO. Senjougahara explains that it isn't just about him, that it's for her own sake too. Whether it would have happened anyway or not, Kaiiki was the one who caused her family to split. In the end, she simply hates Kaiiki. It is fundamentally different to Araragi and the Fire Sisters, who hate Kaiiki out of a sense of justice. That he is evil and they are righteous. That is something she is doing for herself and not for others. Senjougahara knows she was the one who made her mother leave, who made her parents split. She knows Kaiiki was not the cause of those problems, but even so he chose to speed up the process for his own sake. And so for nothing more than her own personal feelings, she hates him. Not because he is an evil villain, but because he is Kaiiki, an object of her hate. A hate that she couldn't even feel at the time due to the crap. In a way then, this may just be the hate she thinks she should be feeling, in the same way any feelings of affection she has for him are the result of what she thinks she would have felt back then. But speculation on Senjougahara's feelings aside, she goes on to say that Araragi is right, but that's all he has. He is strong against hypocrites but is powerless against the truly evil, followed by one of the most mature things Araragi ever says, where he explains his love for her, that he doesn't know why he is dating her, but even so does not need a reason since he loves her. And well, love and justice are in a way the same, they are both following what you believe in, reason be damned. There is no need for right and wrong, just what you want to do. And in another surprising show of maturity, says that he will protect her, and she will protect him in turn. Instead of taking the entire burden on himself, he is happy to share it, because as I think I've said in previous videos, Senjougahara is probably the most important character for Aragi's development, though if you want to argue Hanekawa, Shinobu or Ogi instead, I can definitely see your reasons. Speaking of Shinobu, when Karen goes missing, likely in an attempt to dish out more justice on Kaiiki, it is only through Shinobu's help that Araragi is able to locate his sister, as the two must now cooperate in order for them both to be fulfilled and happy. This is the fruit of their reconciliation earlier in the arc. And when he does, it becomes a fight of fists. After all, Araragi had already made clear that only the strong can go and dish out justice. So Karen took that advice on board, and in order to go and dish out her justice, decided she'd first have to show she was stronger than her brother. He had no intention of listening to her words like an adult, so a childish fight between siblings was the only course of action left. The fight is one of attrition. Karen punches harder, but Araragi as a former vampire keeps getting up. Karen states that the good guy always wins, that if she wins here, she is in the right. And Araragi, even though he was the one spouting the same shit at the start of the arc, and the one to actively teach her this line of thinking, is the one who disputes this, saying that it is as far from justice as possible. And this in general may lead you to believe Araragi is a massive hypocrite, although yes he is. In this case there is more to what he is saying, a misunderstanding we as the watcher have been under just like Karen currently is. The strength to be right, the strength to win, has nothing to do with punches and kicks. What true strength is, what justice is, well, it's conviction. The reason the Fire Sisters were just playing hero in Araragi's eyes was because they weren't doing it for themselves. They were helping others, sure, but why? If they need to find a reason in others, then can they really call it their own conviction? It echoes what Kaiiki had said before. Without a strong conviction behind your actions, a conviction you'd risk your life for, then how can you ever claim to be right? If you are forcing your justice on others, making them the reason for your actions, how can you take responsibility? If you can't live without self-sacrifice or find self-fulfillment, then you have no leg to stand on. But even with all that said, even if you are a fake, if you can live with that, then so be it. If you are happy to be inferior, to be a fake, then that's okay. The issue Araragi had was that his sisters wouldn't accept that fact. They acted as something they weren't and knew eventually they would be in a situation where they could not take responsibility. And again, I must stress this dialogue on conviction, self-sacrifice, finding fulfillment in yourself, etc. is just as much aimed at Araragi himself as it is Karen, as will become very apparent in later arc analysis videos. But the other important aspect of this scene is how the fight ends. Not with fists, but with words, with a dialogue, as that is how adults settle things. That is what growing up amounts to, as becomes very clear in the next scene, where we finally get the confrontation between Senjougahara and Kaiiki, and since this is an adult we're dealing with, there is no fight, nothing bombastic to speak of. Kaiiki folds immediately, he gives up. This contrasts so beautifully with Monogatari, where each arc ends with either a punch-up or a supernatural event, and instead this arc ends with nothing but a normal middle-aged man giving up without a fight. I mean, it might be quite obvious by now, but what it means to be an adult is a constant theme throughout this arc, and adults don't need oddities to understand their problems. Childish fantasies like heavy stone crabs and vampires have no place in the world of the mature, and so this mature problem ends without any such fantasies. Even the fiery bee is explained away as simple hypnosis. Kaiiki says he himself doesn't know anything about the supernatural, he just knows people who think they do. He doesn't believe in monsters, as he says. Monsters aren't real, and so there are no victims. Believing in them is what makes you think you are a victim. A very accurate description, in all honesty. The underlying problems are what need addressing, not the oddities on the surface. Araki comes to conclude that Kaiiki is a fake through and through. In other words, he is someone who has accepted his inferiority and is content with it, and in that way he is just as real as the real thing. He said the same thing to Karen after their fight. The backdrop to this scene is also of note, a Super Sentai stage show, quite ironic given all the talk of justice and childish games this arc. Also a few times in this scene we see Kaiki's dialogue overlaid with the squawking of a crow, as if the crow is speaking Kaiki's words. The choice of crows here is quite interesting, as although in the West we may see them as harbingers of despair, in Japan, as discussed in the Kaimi Vamp video, they tend to represent rebirth and act as spiritual guides. And this may be a reach, but in a way Kaiiki here acts as a catalyst for Senjougahara to change and leave her past aside, and find fulfillment in her current self and her new life. So perhaps that's what the crows are all about. Now Araki, Senjougahara and Kaiiki, it is a strange odd love triangle, if you even want to call it that. But polygons aside, it is undeniable how much of an effect these two men have had on Senjougahara's life, for the better or the worse. Both men were her saviours, that is how she saw them at first, that's why she fell in love with Araki, and that is why she is ashamed to admit that if her emotions were still with her back then, she would have fell in love with Kaiiki too. Senjougahara obviously did not love Kaiiki, because at the time she could not love. Her emotions along with her weight had been snipped off by the pincer of a crab, but she knows herself and she knows how she would have felt if she could have felt. Her love for Kaiiki is a what if in her mind, a frightening reality she knew could have come to be. His very existence makes her doubt her own love for Araki, because if she could have fallen in love with scum like him, then isn't she saying Araki is just as bad? She must confront him to prove that Araki is better, that she loves him for nothing more than just saving her. But to just focus on the effect of these two men would be doing Senjougahara herself a disservice. She has matured well and truly, to the point Kaiiki now sees her as boring. She isn't an ally of justice, she ain't into those childish games, she simply hates con men like Kaiiki. And most importantly, she takes offence to Kaiki's comments about her current self. Why? Because the current her is the person Araki loves, a clear showing of how much she has changed since Hitaki Crab, and the self-love she now feels. Kaiiki is honestly a little taken aback by the revelation of their relationship, and then walks right between them, read into this as you will. He then before leaving goes on to explain that the person who assaulted Senjougahara ended up hit by a car and died. The lesson here, as he puts it, is to not expect anything dramatic from life, and then he departs. Nothing of any significance happens in this scene on the surface. Kaiiki folds and then leaves, but on a deeper level this moment of closure for Senjougahara is the moment she fully puts her past behind her, and fully committed to the future. She matures fully after this, hence why she goes on after this to, do the deed with Araki. This deed being symbolic of a lot of things. Not only is it her giving up her innocence and maturing, but also considering her trauma, the fact she's allowing someone to now sleep with her consensually shows how much she has left that trauma in the past. She is no longer chained down by it. It will not stop the current her from being happy with the man she loves. And that to me is a pretty good conclusion to this arc. But before we get to my final thoughts, we first have to explore the beauty that is Futo Kotome is the first of Nisemonogatari's openings, focusing around the character of Senjougahara. And although I will fully admit there ain't too much to this opening, especially compared to the previous ones we've looked at in this video series, what I think is pretty clear about this opening is that it is focused around Senjougahara's past, of her insecurities about the past and her trying to look forward into the future, and accept that she is now living in the present and her past is just that, the past. This of course mirroring her arc across the arc. When we first see the opening, Senjougahara is in silhouette, this vanishing by the second time it is shown in episode 3. Which just so happens to be the episode where we learn of Kaiiki and his past with Senjougahara. Now personally I believe this silhouette represents her past, with it being shrouded in shadows as Senjougahara has not let anyone in or to see it fully. Only by accepting Aragi fully in this arc and coming to love her present self does she leave her past behind, hence the opening switches to colour as she is no longer hiding from her past. And if you think that is all there is to this opening, in the symbolism department, fair enough. I can understand if anything more sounds like a reach, but we believe in death of the author around here, so let's reach as far as we can. The opening starts with a lot of staplers, reminiscent of how they move in Staple Stable, in the black and white version, and if this is meant to represent her past, then having a callback to her first opening, which itself represents her trauma and her self-defense mechanisms, makes a lot of sense. This though is not present in the coloured version, as she is making progress to move on, and so instead starts with Senjougahara pointing her stapler at the camera. In fact, she even may be forcing the camera away or blocking it with her stapler, a sign of her past self-defense mechanism. She is keeping the camera at arm's reach, possibly even using the stapler to stop it getting any closer. She then covers part of her face from the camera with the stapler, maybe a sign of her insecurity, again wanting to stay away from others, and physically using her stationery as a shield. Then resorts to using the stapler on the camera, resulting in a splurt of blood reminiscent of what she did to Aragi. And although I personally do not think this is what was intended, and kinda hope it wasn't intended either, but in the first version of the opening, the blood splatter is white, which could maybe, and I really mean maybe, be a reference to her trauma and her attempted assault. Not something I personally believe in, but it is an interpretation of the opening and would fit with this shadowed version representing her past she does not want to talk about. The camera next tries to keep on Senjougahara's face, but she keeps avoiding it. She is no longer turning to violence to solve her problems, she is trying to look forward, but the camera, maybe representing her past, is trying to keep hold of her. She does up her hair, perhaps showing she is ready to face the future, or at least won't just sit by and now intends to do something herself. Lastly, we see her falling in a recreation of her fall from the start of Itagi Crab. This could maybe represent how she is falling back into her past, with Kaiiki rocking up and her past being brought back to the forefront. Or could represent her salvation from her past, as this is the moment she met Aragi and was able to find the courage to save herself. And the lyrics themselves line up with this interpretation, with them basically boiling down to Senjougahara's insecurities about who she is and of her past, with her questioning if she is still the same person Aragi fell in love with. But again, a lot of that is a reach, which will also be true for the next opening we discuss, my personal favourite opening in Nisemonogatari. So without further ado, let us discuss the beauty that is. Marshmallow Justice is one of my all-time favourite Monogatari openings, an upbeat and energetic opening just like Karen herself. The opening scene shows Karen against the background of honeycomb. Her body is semi-opaque, maybe to show how she is not fully confident in who she is. How she isn't sure she is the real thing and not actually a fake like her brother keeps telling her. Or possibly how she isn't doing justice for herself but for others and so cannot be certain of herself. Her body is fading in and out with a red and blue version of her, which could represent the fire or justice in her heart trying to get out, like how her body cannot contain it, or alternatively represents the disconnect between the various sides of herself, something supported by the next scene where Karen is literally split in two. Now what these two sides represent isn't easy to pin down. They could be her and her delusions, the real Karen and the fake hero, or maybe her and her ideals. Whatever they are, it's clear there is some disconnect inside of Karen, something Kaiiki points out to her, and so this idea of her being disconnected continues across this opening. Like here where her body is split up into 5. One of her eyes is replaced with text in this scene. This could be similar to how Aragi always has an eye covered by its fringe. Much like Aragi, she isn't seeing the full truth, though I think this comes less from insecurity like her brother, and more from her resolve to see a black and white world of good and evil. She splits again, this time into 3, and then in a few seconds into 2. Her eyes are also a focus in this part of the opening, them being incredibly blue too, way more than hers usually are, since they are, usually grey. Maybe this represents how she is looking at the world through unnaturally bright eyes, in that she is seeing the world as a more ideal place with clear-cut good and evil. She sees no grey, hence her eyes lose their grey tinge. We see her egg hairpin, the symbol of the Fire Sisters, turn into a wormhole of such, which eventually turns into the bee. Considering the bee isn't even real, just in her head, this wormhole could be her falling into her own imagination, since the Fire Sisters are in a way just her and Tsukihi playing Justice. A delusion that leads them down the rabbit hole as such, resulting in her being stung by an imaginary bee. This bee explodes into a ball of flames. This could represent how it isn't real at all, and this flame is more a puff of smoke, or could be the moment it stings her, which would fit better with what we previously discussed, the rabbit hole of her Fire Sister Justice leading to the consequence of being stung. The lyrics during this part explaining how she can't stand idly by as she is an ally of justice, almost as if to explain that delusion or not she must do this to stay true to her ideals, bee sting and all. During this sting there are also two Karens present, as this sting happens at the turning point of her character in this arc, her meeting with Kaiiki, who exposes her as a fake, leading to an internal conflict, hence the two Karens. Araki appears from within the flames as he takes on part of the fever, and then she looks up at him after he has done so. As well, in general, she looks up to her big brother a lot. However, he appears small, maybe because Karen still views him as weak. She still doesn't understand the strength Araki has been lecturing him about and only views it as physical strength, hence seeing him as small and weak. We then see her almost harnessing the flames. This could be one of two things. Either this is Karen going to fight Araki, as she won't let the sting keep her from fighting for her ideals, which could be backed up by the lyrics where Karen argues her noble acts aren't that bad, almost as if she's directly refuting Araki's arguments, or is maybe her after the arc, having learnt and changed, this fire now no longer representing the bee, but the justice in her heart, in which case the lyrics could reference her defiance to his so-called wisdom at the end of the arc, when she wants to pursue justice even if it's fake. We then see three hands pointing at each other, and I really have no idea what this is about. There's a couple trios in this arc. It could reference the Araki siblings, or Araki and Senjougahara going to confront Kaiiki, but I really don't have a good guess on this part. Finally, we see Araki turn into a swarm of bees. This could mean a couple of things. If the bees represent the Kaiiki issue, then this could mean Araki is facing a way larger problem than Karen, his real pursuits of justice being magnitudes larger than Karen's. If the bee represents Karen's delusions, it could show how Araki is miles more deluded than her, and has way more problems to deal with. Or if the bee represents this arc as a whole, could show how many more trials Araki will still have to face. Or lastly, shows that Araki is exactly the same as Karen and in fact is an even more extreme version of her and the things he accused her of, but that's up to interpretation. Here is a fun question: why the hell is Karen represented by a bee? Beside the fact she wears a yellow and black jacket, of course. I bring this up because, as made clear in our previous arc analysis videos, the oddity each character is afflicted with represents them quite well. Crabs have hard exteriors but soft insides, like Senjougahara. Snails are so slow that it takes them forever for them to get anywhere, like how Hachikuji, no matter how long she walks, can never find her way home. Monkeys in Japan represent the negative side of human nature, particularly people who foolishly imitate others, much like how the monkey paw only brought out Kanbaru's true negative emotions out of jealousy for Araki, who did what she couldn't. Snakes are cold-blooded, much like how Sengoku's true self underneath all the cuteness her parents forced on her was cold in comparison. Cats, unlike dogs, are not confined by their homes, they spend much of their time wandering the streets, much like Hanikawa. So of course a bee is very apt for Karen too. Bees are energetic, they are busy. Well, in reality they're actually quite lazy, but generally they are considered to be hard and diligent workers, much like how Karen is energetic, always up to something. Bees will not hesitate to attack in the name of the hive. They will do so at their own expense. You know the idea of a bee committing suicide by stinging a threat, this being perfect symbolism for Karen, who fights for not herself, but for others, who will stick her neck out and risk her own health for the sake of justice. Like how a bee will fight in the name of the hive, she will in the name of justice. A bee then is an excellent symbol of Karen and the kind of person she is. Overall, Karen B is an arc about a lot of things. Growing up, justice, fakes, good, evil. But at the end of the day, it can be boiled down to two main things. A girl who wants to do good and help others to make their brother proud, and a girl who wants to move past their past and love their present. To sum up the former, Karen comes to better understand her brother and his view of justice. She grows enough to admit she is a fake, but is strong enough to challenge the notion that being a fake is any less meaningful than being the real thing. She hasn't grown up yet, but that is okay. And for the latter, Senjougahara learns that she can't hide from the past. She can't physically prevent Araki from interacting with her past. If she wants to move forward, if she wants to love him, she must let him stand by her side. He gives her the strength to face her past and move past it. It's him that teaches her to love herself as she currently is. as only by loving herself could she save herself. To speak personally for a moment, I goddamn love Nisemonogatari, and Karen B, although telling one of the most disjointed stories in the series, to me spins one of the most moving and emotionally driven. It's an arc propelled by Araki's love for his sisters and for his girlfriend, but at the same time it is the desires of those two that drive their actions. And quickly, just a big sorry for the massive gap between the last video and this one, and hopefully this is out before the off-season drops, fingers crossed. But even if it took a while, I can't say I didn't have fun making this video, because themes and emotions aside, Karen B is just a lot of fun. Nisemonogatari is fundamentally a story about fakes, with its first arc focusing on a fake hero and a fake villain, though what is fake and what is real in the end doesn't matter all that much. It is instead how one is seen that is important. And so in the second arc of this part we are faced with not a fake hero but a fake sister, and Araki is faced with the dilemma that is Tsukihi. Is she his sister or a fake? So if that sounds interesting to you, then strap in for the 9th video in the Monogatari arc analysis series, where we will explore the beauty that is Nisemonogatari's Tsukihi Phoenix. So if you find yourself entertained at any point during the video, then consider liking, subscribing and ringing that bell. Anyway, on with the video. The arc opens with a discussion on the true identity of Araki Tsukihi, and although not that much of substance is revealed to us, there is a few things to take note of. For example, how in this collection of panels her appearance is different in each one. There is little consistency to how she is presented, almost as if she as a person is not consistent. There's also a very large amount of past footage being used, something not that common in Monogatari, but here we see many scenes from the previous arc. And although there is a couple ways to interpret this, the one my mind tends to lean towards is that this represents how she does not change. As well, Araki is describing her present attributes, but instead of visuals of the present Tsukihi, it is images of the past, with a nice grey filter to assure us that this is the past we're looking at. And this may be to say that it's almost as if she is the same as she was back then. She is the same no matter what time frame we look at. And then we end the opening monologue with the fact she is immortal. The following scene is of Araki studying, only to be interrupted by his bigger little sister, Karen, and upon her arrival we see no visual of her, because this arc is of course from Araki's perspective. She has to physically make him look at her, and the moment he does, his interest is captured as she is wearing a skirt. A moment which, as we all know, leads into the infamous toothbrush scene, but we will save that can of brushes for its own section later in the video. But I will quickly point out how Karen blames Araki for her justice ways, aka he is once again the root of his own problems. Anyway, all I'll say about this scene is that as a result of the brushing, Araki agrees to introduce Karen to Kanbaru, which leads us into the pair leaving to enact such an introduction. Araki walks on his feet, Karen on her hands, this being quite a nice way of showing the two live in different worlds. This I believe being foreshadowing for the later reveal of Tsukihi's identity, where Araki is forced to realise the truth of his sister, the reality of the situation, whereas Karen is in the dark about the true horror of their family situation, and so can walk along without a care in the world, represented by her childish handstands. What follows is Karen's super smart way of always winning at rock paper scissors, aka cheating by going first. Although I will agree this is basically a purely comedy scene, if I was to drag some meaning out of it, the fact Karen's plan is to go first before her opponent can react is a great example of her hit first, ask questions later mindset, and the fact she doesn't even understand why this wouldn't work, again fits with her general approach to life. Reminding me of her storming into Kaiiki's office in the previous arc, with no plan beyond decking him in the face. Due to her cheating, Araki gets the pleasure of being given a piggyback by Karen. As he points out himself, this is very much a role reversal, usually the man does the carrying, which could be a statement on the general idea that becomes way more important near the arc's climax, that what others think is normal or acceptable is not important compared to what you want, especially when it comes to family, as we will see in the climax of this arc. Others may think that this piggyback should be the other way around, but as long as Araki and Karen have the resolve to do things a different way, then so be it. However, since it's in the way, Karen proceeds to cut off her ponytail with her house keys and then chuck it in a bin. Now if you've seen my video on why Monogatari characters cut their hair, you know that I view the various moments of characters changing their hairstyles as very important moments, and the fact this one comes out of nowhere and seems to hold no greater value, I believe is of course by design. Because in general, a girl cutting off their hair is a sign of great change, with each character's hair cutting moment happening in correspondence to a big change in their character. However, Karen doesn't undergo a big change in Karen B. Sure, she learns the general lesson that it's fine to be a fake if you accept it, that you can be happy as long as you acknowledge the truth, but the Karen at the end of the arc is basically the same as the one at the start, because of course Karen didn't need to change, hence her cutting her hair doesn't come with this big character moment, and as such is treated with no fanfare, the hair being rendered just trash. This whole moment then almost serving as Nisho Ishin poking fun at his own tropes. Though another way to look at it is that she cuts the hair off for Aragi's sake, as it was in the way, basically reflecting her respect for her brother which has grown due to Karen B. She will happily cut off something she'd been growing since elementary school if it is for his sake. And in general, her wanting to carry him may speak to her desire to be of use to him, that having learned from her actions in the past arc does not want to be merely protected by her big brother, she wants to be like him to help others. And when she does give him a piggyback ride, he is scared that it is too high, maybe a statement on his lacking in maturity, as even if it's not as big a theme in this arc than Karen B, Aragi's maturity, what it means to be an adult, is still relevant. Then we get the introduction of Kagannui, stood atop a mailbox. Now Kagannui in general is a bit of a parallel to Karen. Like how Karen walks upon walls, so does Kagannui. Like how Karen uses her fists to exercise justice, so does Kagannui. Kagannui then in a way will act to demonstrate the most extreme version of justice Araki had already argued was fake back in Karen B. However, unlike Karen who lacked the conviction to be real, Kagannui had strength both in body and mind, to impart her justice on the world without challenge. And like Karen, she has the power to take responsibility for her actions. Unlike Karen, a little sister, she is a big sister. When Kagannui asks for directions to Eiko Cram School, he is forced to call Hanikawa, as because this is Araki and he only focuses on what he wants, he somehow was oblivious to the fact the cram school he spent a bloody lot of time in bears the name of Eiko. Or if you really want to push the idea of Araki's obfuscation, his mind purposely chose to omit those details so he'd have an excuse to talk to Hanikawa. Also, nothing to really say about this scene, but I love it a lot and I am so sad we've yet to have an extended scene of these two together. In the subsequent scene of Hachikuji and Araki, he claims he is an adult, which very loosely ties into his growing maturity across Nisemonogatari, but I wouldn't read too much into this. Best girl made her first appearance, I said with a posed look. And the whole feel of the scene changes. Until now the arc has been pretty light, but now the tone changes. Ononeke's eyes cast in shadow, almost as if to say she's looking at the dark side of the world. She is seeing the dark truth of the arc, that Tsukihi is a monster. And in this long shot we see Araki standing fully in the light and Ononoke right on the border between light and dark, almost as if the information she will soon impart on him is what drags him across this border, or how she as a specialist stands on the border between the real world and the world of oddities. Or it could even represent how it's unclear if she is good or bad, compounding on Karen's earlier comment that she didn't know if Kagannui was good or evil. Or, because things keep popping into my head, her face being half covered in shadow and her body stood between light and dark could represent the general duality of her character, in the same way as her catchphrase being accompanied by an expressionless, far from posed face. But Ononoke really does not get much in the way of exploration within this arc, so I will save any speculation on what her not so posed look represents to her character for an arc analysis down the line. What is of note though is after Araki gives her directions, she turns and heads back into the shadows, not into the light. This could represent how she is going off to deal with Tsukihi as an oddity, the dark truth of the matter. Or maybe how in order to stop her, Araki must too follow her into the shadows, exposing himself to the dark truth of Tsukihi's identity. Or could simply be to show she belongs to the world of oddities and not those of humans, since the sun being the thing that kills vampires, the strongest of all oddities, generally represents reality and connections within the story. See my Kiyomi Vap analysis for details on that. And as such, the darkness represents the opposite of all these, aka the lonely world of oddities. Extrapolating off this might explain why Tsukihi's name includes the words Tsuki, which means moon, as her true nature is an odyssey, and night is the world of oddities, with the moon itself often being representative of oddities as a whole. And this may be a real reach, but next time we see Araki, he is walking into his bedroom within the shadows, with the whole house cast in shadow, a possible sign of the dark secrets that fall over this household, one Araki is soon to realise. Shinobu goes on to trick both us and Araki, bigging up that she is going to reveal the big secret of the arc, only for it to be about Mr. Donut, which could be to prepare us for the fact that this true big secret, Tsukihi's identity, may seem big at first, but is actually quite mundane and not really all that big a deal. We get one of our first actual interactions with the namesake of this arc, Tsukihi. Here we get a very interesting line from Tsukihi, where she comments on how Karen, when she gets into something, stops paying attention to her surroundings. A possible point of contrast between the two sisters, as by definition, all Tsukihi is doing is imitating her surroundings. She is unable to purely focus on one thing, as she is inherently reactionary. This being built upon where she says she doesn't like justice as much as Karen, that she cannot form a clear inner image of it. Unlike her two siblings, she does not have a vision of justice to call her own. She is once again reactionary. She is just imitating what her siblings do, and they both love justice, so she must as well. To fit in is to share views. Karen's blood and soul may be justice, but Tsukihi's aren't, because they are prepared to change at any time. She puts faith in Karen and Aragi's justice. Basically, she follows her example without ever forming any ideals of her own. As she says, if Karen didn't believe so strongly in it, she wouldn't put any stock in vague ideas like justice. It is only because Karen can create such vivid images of justice that Tsukihi can imitate it. She can't copy what she can't see. She full on agrees with Aragi that her justice is fake, but it's fake in a distinctly different way to Karen's. Karen does it for others, she does it because of others' effect on her. She is too easily influenced by others, but she is acutely aware of all this. That is to say that even though the root cause of all this mimicry is her own oddity nature, she herself is not oblivious to it. All she is in the dark about is that she is a bird. Beyond that, she is aware of what that entails, and as such is acutely aware of her own self despite not understanding what she is. Keep this in mind, as it will be important later on when discussing the actual implications of her identity being revealed. The point of this conversation between the two siblings comes to a head when Tsukihi suggests the Fire Sisters may disband. The reason being, she is seeing less of Karen. Maybe a show of maturity and growth on Karen's end, making Tsukihi feel left behind, in the same way she felt about Aragi growing up in the past arc. But because she is seeing less of Karen, she is being affected by her justice less, and so is imitating other people instead. Hence her passion for justice has wavered. Now, we may give Aragi a lot of flack for being oblivious as hell, but some gears were turning in his head, hence why he assaults and undresses his sister, so we can examine a scar on her body, or well, an area of her body that should have had a scar. A bit of obvious foreshadowing to her supernatural ability to regenerate. We finally get to good old Mr. Donut and are treated to something even sweeter than a flocky cho, a scene with Kaiiki. This scene here with Kaiiki is just incredible, for so many reasons. The simple fact the big bad of the previous arc is just sat there eating a donut is so jarring, and really speaks to the truth of Kaiiki. As you know, a normal ass man. He may do some bad things, but it's not like he spends every waking hour scamming kids out of lunch money. He is still just a guy, and so is it that weird to see him chilling in a donut shop? This really helps to frame the truth of him beyond how Aragi saw him and Karen be, as even for Aragi, seeing this man as an embodiment of evil sat eating a donut is a little too much of a stretch. In this scene, Kaiiki sees an opportunity to make some money, gives Aragi a tinge of truth and a load of lies, and then leaves town. And well, to me, this scene sums up the essence of Kaiki's character. He will do anything for a quick buck, but that's it. He's just a normal greedy man. And so his final scene in Nisemonogatari is an even bigger anticlimax than the ending of Karen B. No conflict, no danger, just a simple transaction. The takeaway from the scene for Aragi though is that Kagannui is a specialist in immortal oddities, and as such, due to Kaiki's half-truths, believes he is their target. As he rides home, we now see his house cast in light, not shadows, because the time for the dark truth to be brought to light has arrived. Mononoke is repeatedly pressing the doorbell, as they are not here to see Aragi, they are here for someone else. And the moment that person opens the door,
Unlimited rule book.
Tsukihi is rendered to a pair of legs. Aragi naturally flies off the handle, but is easily put down by Kagannui, one who as said is truly strong. As Mononoke explains, Tsukihi is not actually his sister, but an oddity, the Shidenotori, the dying bird. Thanks to Shinobu's bluffs, they leave for the moment, and because Kagannui at heart is a good person who cares about humans a lot, she does agree that killing Tsukihi in front of Aragi is in poor taste. In fact, her dislike for oddities very much stems from her love of humans, hence why an oddity masquerading as a human disgusts her so much. But even if they retreat for now, the two-man cell states they will return tomorrow to finish things. This is not a problem that can be avoided. Aragi must take action if he wants to protect his sister. And as they leave, Kagannui explains what I already said earlier, that they view themselves as the good guys, and the oddity parasitizing a human family as evil. They are heroes of justice. Now, heading into the final episode, we get an explanation of the Shidenotori. It is an immortal bird, an immortal cuckoo bird, that upon death seeks out a human's womb, replacing the child within. It then grows up in that human family, imitating its new family to become a human in all the ways that matter. The bird isn't even aware that it is a bird, and as such the perfect mimic is born. The victim of an oddity in this situation is not Tsukihi, but Aragi's mother. She was possessed by the bird and had her child replaced by it. However, beyond that, the oddity does no harm. Its only crime is of being a fake. With the front of the house busted open, Aragi stood guard, so to speak, until Karen arrived home. Noticed all the birds flocking around the house. It'd be impossible to miss them, like how it is now impossible for Aragi to look at his sister and not see a bird. Now, before heading off to confront Kagannui, Aragi asks his bigger little sister a question. Would she die for him? Which she obviously says yes to. And then he asks the same about Tsukihi, to which she also says yes. The significance of this being that Karen views both him and Tsukihi the same. They are both her precious siblings, oddity or not, and this gives Aragi the resolve to agree that bird or not, Tsukihi is no less his sister. So to really make sure, he kisses her, because in his own words, he felt nothing from it. It wasn't exciting and he didn't enjoy it, just how a kiss for your sister should be. She really is his sister. No matter the nitty-gritty circumstances, from the moment she was born, from the moment she was Aragi Tsukihi, she was already the younger sister of Karen and Kaomi. That is and will always be true, and as such, with that all put to rest, the flock of birds leave, because Aragi no longer cares about birds. It's such an insignificant detail to him now. When he looks at Tsukihi, he doesn't see a bird, he just sees his sister. He goes to fight Kagannui, the reason? He has none. Because when it comes to family, is there any need for fancy reasons and motives? To which Shinobu replies with the word Tsukihi. In other words, she is remembering the name of a human. This is not only a massive moment of growth for Shinobu and a testament to her and Aragi's relationship, but also in a way shows how Shinobu really has become family to Aragi, and so by extension, Tsukihi is her family too. Which might be why when she drinks Aragi's blood and ages up to her teenage form, she almost resembles Karen, because isn't it only natural to look like your family? Before the fighting happens, we get the hilarious reveal that the one to inform Kagannui about Tsukihi was none other than Kaiiki. Not anything really to add, it just amuses me a lot. And Kagannui is stood upon not the many desks around the place, but the tree instead. Maybe to show how she and Oshino view things differently, not standing on the same plane. Anyway, the fight commences with Aragi saying he is fighting for his sister, and Kagannui replies she is a fake. Their positions here are clear as day. Aragi sees Tsukihi as his sister, worth protecting, oddity or not, and Kagannui sees her as a fake, deceiving a family and so must be exterminated. She asks if he can truly love her the same knowing her true nature, and he of course can. The fact she is an oddity is not enough to change the fact she is his sister. She brings up the point that even if he is okay with it, what about his family? Her compassion seems way more dedicated at his poor mother, the victim of an oddity, than Aragi himself. Her love for people makes her reject Tsukihi almost instinctually. And even so, she still shows compassion to Tsukihi, bringing up how if she was to learn of her own identity, could she carry on as a happy teenage girl? She even throws some shade at Aragi, saying what if Tsukihi used her power to become some immortal hero of justice? The general point she is making here is that it's fine for him to have his opinions and know what he thinks is right, but she believes it is wrong for him to force those beliefs onto others. After pummeling him to a bloody pulp, Kagannui asks Shinobu if she wants to have a final round, but Shinobu replies that her master has yet to lose to her. Aragi has not conceded to her words or her fists. He acknowledges she is a good guy and that he may be evil, but says he doesn't care as that has nothing to do with right or wrong. They are his family. He can lie to them, deceive them, force his own ideals on them. But so what? He can do that because they are family. Family aren't just strangers, they are family. And to this declaration, Kagannui brings up the theory of fundamental evil. That we are all born evil, that is our true nature, and as such to be good we must make a deliberate act of it. To be good and honest is to be a fake, it is to betray your inherent nature, it is hypocrisy. But by doing so, by becoming a fake, you become greater, you become good. It's like what Kaiiki says, a fake is more valuable than the real thing, because in its deliberate attempt to become real, it's more real than the real thing. Aragi doesn't get Kagannui to change her views on Tsukihi, but he does manage to convince her not to act on her justice. In this confrontation between the two, the idea of forcing ideals on people is brought up, which is quite interesting in relation to Kagannui. Although you could say she is forcing her ideals, her notion of justice onto people, since she believes her justice to be the true justice, in her mind then her ideals are always right. Another way to look at it though is that she is not forcing her ideals on anyone, she is just acting on them. And anyone who opposes her is stepping towards her ideals of their own volition. In that line of thinking, she never forces her ideals on anyone, she just acts without concern for any other opinions. And is that not the essence of a true unbending absolute justice? It's why in this confrontation Araki never challenges Kagannui's justice. He instead agrees with it. He accepts that his sister is evil, that being a fake and a monster is evil, and then resolves to take all that evil onto himself. Because like how she believes there is a way life should be lived, he believes there is a way family should be. It took a bloody brawl for Araki to finally get his point across to Kagannui. He showed her that his ideals aren't so flimsy they can be beaten out of him. His love for his sister is as absolute as her views on justice. This is why I believe she left willingly after their exchange, even after beating him to an inch of his life, because even at that point his views did not change, they are absolute. But still, I must stress he doesn't change her views on justice and his sister, because Kagannui's opinions, her justice cannot change, and this is because of her belief in universal absolutism. But the point is that he didn't have to change them, that was never his intention, he just wanted to protect his sister, which is what he did. We must remember though that even if she is an antagonist, Kagannui is not a villain, she only is doing all this because of her care for others, because she is trying to save her family from the deception of an oddity, she is trying to squash evil, she is a self-confessed good guy. She may want to exterminate an oddity, but that is all it is. And when faced with someone with just as strong ideals as her, she lets him off. Maybe this whole thing was a test to see if he really is worthy of taking on the burden of his sister, who knows. After all, she leaves by reciting unlimited rulebook, a rulebook filled mostly with exceptions. What is important though is that she acknowledges Araki as a human, this bringing the ideas first mentioned in Karen B full circle. The worries Araki had about his vampirism, but he was worried for nothing, as even one who sees all oddities as evil sees him as nothing more than a human. He never fought to kill in that fight, he fights like a normal old human, because much like Kaiiki, that's all he is, just a regular old guy. He goes home and his sister says welcome home, just as a family should. Oh, and he says he will introduce her to Senjougahara, which trust me is more important than you'd think, but you gotta wait till the next video where we discuss Nisemonogatari as a whole to hear about that. But okay, as nice as all that was, I know what you've all been waiting for. Yes, let's talk about the toothbrush scene, but before that we have to explore the beauty that is. Platinum Disco, the best opening in all of Monogatari, according to you all, the YouTube polls do not lie. And although, please don't hurt me, I don't rank it as highly as most people do, it's still a phenomenal opening. The title of the opening is obviously in reference to Tsukihi's catchphrase, Platinum Mad, but the disco part of the name is a bit more up to interpretation. Disco as a whole is quite old school, being seen as a staple of the 70s long before Tsukihi's time, so maybe this references how her true identity is an immortal bird, one that lived through these past times. Disco dancing is also defined by repetitive movements, swaying side to side and whatnot. This repetitiveness could then mirror how Tsukihi's life is so repetitive. But okay, onto the opening itself. It starts with Tsukihi dancing, expect a lot of that, with us soon seeing two Tsukihis dancing. This I think being a clear reference to the fact she is a fake, a copy, a mimic. So you can see one of them as the true Tsukihi and the other as the fake Tsukihi, if you will. But both dance in unison as she is a perfect copy and indistinguishable fake. In the background, notice Araki walking covered in shadow. Now by the end of the arc, Araki allows himself to become a monster for her sake, so she can go unhappy. This might be what this represents. He is cast in shadow as he knows the truth and has become a monster to protect her. He is in the background because this does not affect her. Her dancing represents her being blissfully unaware of her true identity, while he suffers in the background, but he is happy regardless as he gets to watch her be happy. After this dancing, the two Tsukihis fuse into one, as real or fake she is still just Tsukihi. We get two Tsukihis once again, but one is smaller and inverted. Maybe this represents the slight imperfection in her mimicry that Kagannui, or well, technically Kaiiki, saw through, or could be how Araki realised she was a fake. It's up to interpretation. Next we see her alone, and slightly faded. Maybe this indicates her true threat as nothing of actual danger, or maybe it's her in a weakened state, like after being unlimited rulebooked, and since that cuts her in two, maybe that's why there's only one Tsukihi and not two. Afterwards she is caught up in a storm of hands. My take on this is that this represents how Tsukihi is always passive to the actions around her, just going with the flow. She next is sat inside her brother's mouth. This could reference the kiss maybe, or how the Shidanotori grows inside a human body, but more likely is to show how Araki protected her from Kagannui using not actions but his words. It was his defiant speech that made Kagannui retreat, so she is safe behind his words, so inside his mouth. Following, she looks up at the screen while Araki watches in the background. He is always keeping an eye on her, but she is looking the other way as she doesn't even realise. We see the moon, but it very much resembles an egg, also representing the one the Shidanotori laid in Araki's mother. And then some legs moving back and forth, almost like a metronome or clock hands. Keep these in mind for a moment. Tsukihi then dances while changing her looks, both in hairstyle and outfit, this of course representing her nature as a mimicking bird, always changing to mimic her surroundings. The next scene is packed full of meaning. For one, the two Tsukihis are rocking back and forth much like her legs had before. This reminds me of a clock, like for example a cuckoo clock. Clocks go round and round, back and forth forever, never changing it up. Much like how the Shidanotori lives forever, going through one life after another, never changing. Two mirrored birds flap next to her, pretty self-explanatory, and behind them is Araki covering his eye with a hand, this being him being in the dark about Tsukihi's identity, but then he uncovers his eye as he learns the truth. But he will protect her even so, hence why she is once again inside his mouth, protected by his words. And she continues to dance looking up, showing she is oblivious to his actions to protect her. When he shuts his mouth, she ends up split in two, this being a reference to when Ononoke blows off her top with unlimited rulebook. Yet even in half she continues to dance, because even after dying she is still unaware. She then explodes into a flock of birds, revealing the image of the Shidanotori, again pretty self-explanatory. The whole opening's sepia tone likely being another reference to her great age, given her immortal nature. It's much like how she wears very old school traditional Japanese clothes, because again she has been alive for much of the past. In terms of the lyrics of the song, they tell of Tsukihi stepping out into a so-called platinum world, and her heart starts beating when she lays eyes on the back of someone under the moonlight, with her going to explain that even though she is fickle about both changing and unchanging things, she will dedicate eternity to this person. However, even though she is happy, she will soon turn to sad, leaving her to question why she is so discontent. Now in terms of who she is talking about, could be her boyfriend, but I think it's too simple an answer. Considering Tsukihi's name includes the kanji for moon, it could well be that this person she is singing about is herself, almost as if this is telling of her being reborn into this world, now named after the moon, but that does seem like a bit of a stretch. Whatever the case, these lyrics really get across Tsukihi's reactionary nature, going from platinum happy to platinum sad, and her feelings towards things both changing and unchanging. And well, the overall feel of the song is, well, nostalgic, though that could just be me, and that too, I feel, plays well into Tsukihi as a character. Okay people, toothbrush time. Now I know I am the guy that will defend the artistic intent behind Kaomi Vamp's panty scenes and Karen B's weird Sengoku flirt session, but even I find a limit with the toothbrush scene. As I think in terms of deeper character writing, there isn't all that much here, at least that's the limit of my interpretation of the scene. But even if from a writing point of view I don't think this scene is anything that special, from another point of view I think it is simply spectacular. So let me explain. Now inherently the act of brushing someone's teeth is not sexual, and in a way nothing in this scene is actually sexual. However, due to the way the scene is directed and presented, we cannot help but find ourselves shocked by this scene. Now Nisemonogatari as a whole presents its fan service in an extremely interesting way, as everything is purposeful. Sengoku is actively trying to seduce Araki. Shinobu does not give a shit she is naked, so the scene doesn't treat her naked body any differently than if she was clothed. And the toothbrush scene, despite being not sexual in the slightest, is warped into the monster of a scene we are presented with due to the idea of intimacy. Karen's goal in this scene is to get Araki to introduce her to Kambaru, and Araki's is to make that not happen. Simple enough. Karen wears Tsukihi's clothes, a deliberate decision to throw Araki off guard, so to speak. Karen in general is very androgynous. Her clothes usually don't scream anything effeminate, neither do her actions. Yet here she is actively pushing against that image, but it doesn't exactly fit. They aren't her own clothes, and they physically don't fit. These are all points of vulnerability for Karen, and as such impose an image on her, backed up by her words I might add, of an innocent and attractive young girl. She is actively preying upon her brother to make him lower his guards, all in the aim of getting what she wants. It's effectively the same as what Sengoku did. The camera isn't sexualizing her, she is actively sexualizing herself. and so Araki, to fight back, introduces this toothbrushing game. He intends to make her uncomfortable so he gets what he wants. In a way, this scene is like the reverse of fanservice. Fanservice takes a character and strips them down to just an object of arousal, whereas in this scene the characters are actively imposing a sexual atmosphere onto a normal situation. The camera isn't sexualizing them, they are sexualizing the situation itself, and by doing so they bring out a comedy that cannot be achieved through conventional means. The intimacy showed in this scene is what makes it so effective. There is complete transparency between the two, complete honesty. And because we understand that, we can emphasize with both of them, and hence when they feel erotic, we do too. There is no need for anything sexual to actually occur, because we know the characters view the situation as erotic. It's a testament to the skill of Nisho Ishin as a writer, and Shaft as an animation studio, that this scene works as well as it does. It makes us feel just as involved in the act as the characters. It includes us in the intimacy. It is a truly outrageous scene, I will not disagree, but even so I feel no scene better shows the lengths this series will go through to depict something that no one was asking for, but doing it in a way we cannot get enough of. Now, as explained, the central idea of this arc is the value of a fake. The two sides of the argument around this being our protagonist Araki and our antagonist Kagannui. Araki's view is that a fake that is indistinguishable from the real thing should be viewed as just that, the real thing. Tsukihi being real or fake had no impact on him nor his family. The fact they had never noticed before was a testament to the fact that her identity had no bearing on her place in their family. Tsukihi played the perfect human so well that it came to a point where it seemed pointless to even question her humanity. A fake that is so good that the question of its authenticity never arises. The only issue that arises from it is that Araki must now protect her from those who view her as a fake and want to hurt her. Kagannui's view though is that a fake is not authentic, that it is inherently dishonest and as such should be exposed. Her stance on oddities is very firm, it's good or bad, not anywhere near as black and white as someone like Karen may see it, but her views are absolute, all on their own. Much like Karen, she is a hero of justice, but unlike Karen, she has the strength, both literal and in conviction, to impose her justice on the world and take responsibility for the consequences. The line between human and oddity, between a real human and a fake human, cannot become muddled. That is the black and white line she draws, the line she acts upon as a hero of justice. However, even if she pushes her ideals on the world, they still remain no one's ideals but her own. Unlike Araki, who in Kagannui's eyes is forcing his own ideals onto his family by allowing a fake to live among them, they get no say in the matter. That is what Kagannui explained. But again, this brings us back to Araki's view, that being that they don't need to know. What you don't know won't hurt you. I can take it all onto myself. And considering Tsukihi herself doesn't even know the truth of her own identity, then the only one being affected by her being a fake is Araki, the man who was resolved to take the burden of the truth. Much like how he did not care if Karen was a fake hero as long as she didn't put herself in danger, he does not care if Tsukihi was a fake human as long as she was the same little sister he loves. Both these characters and their opposing views on the situation are valid. Both at the end of the day are bringing their own view of justice, their own conviction, into the situation. In the end, Araki wins out. But that isn't to say he is right and Kagannui was wrong. As much like how when it comes to Tsukihi, the line between fake and real becomes blurred, and the same can be said for right and wrong. What I will say though is that Araki standing up to Kagannui, putting his life on the line for his own conviction, his own love for his sister, links back to the general ideas of maturity laid out in Karen B. This is Araki showing he is on the path to an adult. This is him handling a situation against a foe he cannot hope to beat physically, almost like a reverse of Karen's interaction with Kaiiki, an opponent she could beat physically, but not in any way that counts. Him winning through his conviction, not through punches and kicks, is us being shown why he had the right to preach to Karen in the prior arc, because although he is still far from a true adult, given he had to rely on his vampiric nature, the personification of his immaturity, he has taken the first step to solve problems as an adult, which we must commend him for. Going into this video, I was under the impression that Tsukihi Phoenix did not hold a candle to Karen B. Although I still hold the former arc of Nisemonogatari in a higher standing than its latter arc, I think I treated this arc too harshly, as not only does it build upon the themes of Karen B in an interesting way, but it brings the entire story of Nisemonogatari to a heartfelt and purposeful conclusion. At its heart, Monogatari is a story about Araki Kayomi, of him coming of age and saving himself. And Nisemonogatari is yet another important step in our protagonist's journey to such a conclusion, where he proves not only his conviction, but proves he is human. that he will do whatever it takes for his family, that he is fine with being evil, being a fake, if it means his sisters stay happy. I'd argue this is the first time he is truly fighting to save someone else, though that is obviously a controversial opinion. At the end of the day though, he thinks Tsukihi is his sister, and that is all that matters. The takeaway of the arc being that who gives a shit if you're a fake, it's how others view you that really matters. And if they don't think you're a fake, then who cares if you are really authentic? I mean, if fundamental evil is real, then every decent person out there, both you and me, well, we are all fakes too. But I don't know about you, but personally, I feel pretty loved by my friends, my family, and of course you guys who watch these videos. So who gives a shit if I'm a fake, because people still like me regardless? And as long as people like me, then I can like me too. Thanks for watching, and make sure to stay subscribed, as in the next Monogatari arc analysis video, we will be looking at Nisemonogatari as a whole, and you don't want to miss that. Nisemonogatari, A Tale of Fakes. In the last two videos we discussed in depth the Kagannui and Tsukihi Phoenix arcs, and although I know we are also eager to get on to Nekomonogatari Kuro, first I want to take some time to discuss Nisemonogatari as a whole and the themes that overarch both of its two arcs, be them the meaning of a fake, of justice, and the way characters like Senjougahara and Shinobu progress. So if that sounds interesting to you, then strap in for the 10th video in the Monogatari arc analysis series, where we will explore the beauty that is Nisemonogatari. So if you find yourself entertained at any point during the video, then consider liking, subscribing and ringing that bell. Anyway, on with the video. Of course, the parts that name translates to fake story is going to be about fakes, be it a fake hero of justice, a fake specialist, a fake oddity, a fake sister. In a way you could even call Araki and Shinobu fakes, the dredges of the vampire. However, rather than telling us the real thing is good and the fake is bad, Nisemonogatari offers a more subjective interpretation. Value is in the eyes of the beholder, and so is authenticity. It's a bit like the concept of oddities as a whole. They are only real if one believes in them, only authentic through the eyes of the afflicted. Araki could not see the heavy stone crab, it was not real until he was convinced of it. Before that moment, it was a non-existent fake. Kaiiki was seen as a being of pure evil by Araki, that was his true nature. He was a real threat. However, once his true nature was exposed, Araki changed his view of Kaiiki and now saw him as a fake. Kaiiki himself never changed. He was the same outside the Kanbaru household as he was outside the Super Sentai stage. What changed was Araki and his assessment of Kaiiki's authenticity. The Fire Reef Bee was never real, but Araki treated it as a real oddity because that is what he thought it was, what he assessed it to be. But when Kaiiki revealed it was all made up, it was now assigned as fake. Again, the oddity did not change, just Araki's perception, his assessment of it. It's almost like real and fake are fluid terms, terms with no real inherent meaning. This is best shown through Tsukihi. She objectively is a fake, at least according to Kagannui, a specialist with the knowledge of the Shijinotori. But to everyone else, she is an indistinguishable fake. In other words, she is the real thing. Her value in relation to her authenticity is a non-factor until someone questions said authenticity. If Kagannui never exposed her as a fake, then she is the real thing. If you are acknowledged as real, that is what you are. This shown at the end of Tsukihi Phoenix of Araki acknowledging Tsukihi as real. Her being a bird does not negate her being his sister. She is real to him in his eyes as the beholder, she is real. Which is of course why this is the finale of this part. The end of Nisemonogatari, the story of fakes, is Araki acknowledging a fake as the real thing. The thesis of the story on fakes being that fake and real are just what you make of them. If you believe a fake is real, then it no longer is fake. Labels like those don't have any inherent meaning, it is only because you as a person inscribed something with meaning that it has any. Tsukihi is a fake to Kagannui, that never changes, but likewise she is real to Araki. It is like Schrodinger's cat. Something is simultaneously both real and fake until it is observed, the observer choosing how they see it. Because authenticity is not inherent, it is just an opinion given by those who lay eyes upon something. In other words, it's not up to you whether you are real or fake, but it is up to you whether somebody else is. Now, justice is one of the most central themes of Monogatari, even beyond Nisemonogatari. Though I have a whole video on this, so I'll paraphrase here. In Nisemonogatari, we are shown the Fire Sisters' brand of justice, a black and white justice that thwarts evil, a justice that is good and punishes bad. In Araki's view, a childish justice. The Fire Sisters, though, always impart justice on someone else's behalf. They went after Kaiiki because he scammed the other kids of the town, not because they, themselves, had any issue with him. Neither of them had met him, neither had been hurt or conned by him. All they had was the word of others, That was enough for Karen to march over there and declare she would plant her fist in his face. They decided he was evil because that is what others decided. Karen went after him in the name of justice, but it's not her justice. As Araki says to her, does she have any of her own will in it? He argues they are just playing hero, just fighting against what others call evil. Araki's argument is that the hero with no will of their own is just a fake. If you can't make up your mind yourself, if you just blindly fight whatever someone else calls evil, then can you really be called justice? Karen says other people provide them with the reason to fight, but if that's true, then they are nothing more than enforcers picking on anyone the majority sees as wrong or evil. Justice is not objective, but that doesn't mean it is simply a majority rule, with Araki himself being terrified of such an idea, of a manufactured justice with the only deciding factor being numbers. Araki chastising his sisters because they were an agent to the fake manufactured justice that scared him so much. A justice that wasn't just, that wasn't in the name of goodness, a justice with an agenda, one made to punish someone that people did not like. Araki tells them that only the strong can act on justice, that if you lack the strength you are just a fake playing hero. Karen argues that she is strong because she knows karate, but that's not the right kind of strength, it is strength of will. Once again, she lacks any will of her own, she is weak because she doesn't do things for herself. And so when they fight, he wins, and the reason is will. Because although a lot of what Araki does is fueled by the reasons of others, his love for his family is not. That is his justice, his will. As that is what justice is in Monogatari. It is not right or wrong, it is not black and white. Justice is simply what you believe is right, not what others believe it is, what you believe. Justice for the sake of others is fake, it is hollow, it is not true justice as there is no will in it. I mean, just look at Kaiiki. He is someone who doesn't believe in justice, and that in itself is his justice. His view of what is right and wrong is that nothing is right and wrong. He utterly crushes Karen in spirit and will because he knows exactly who he is and what he stands for. Whereas Karen doesn't know who she is or what she stands for. She needs someone else's input, the reasons of others to fight for. The point is that justice is just will. Kagannui being another character who embodies justice. She believes in universal absolutism. With every fibre of her being, she believes there is an objective right and wrong, and so that is true justice. As although she also sees things as black and white, good and evil like Karen, she has 100% confidence in her belief. She has the will to act on it absolutely. Seeing things as black and white isn't wrong. However, if you are too weak to not even be able to assign good and bad yourself, then you cannot even attempt to call yourself justice. Justice can be in service to others, but only if it's because you believe that is right. Justice doesn't seek its rationale outside itself. If you need others to tell you what justice is, then that isn't justice as Karen blatantly displays. One's ideals can be shaped by others, but never should they be dictated by others, because they are yours and yours alone. It's fine to fight for justice, but if you do, make sure it's for what you believe in, not just what others tell you, as the only one who knows what your justice is you, as justice is simply doing something of your own volition. Although the protagonist of Nisemonogatari is undoubtedly Araki, it cannot be denied that second place goes to Senjougahara. To recap shortly, in Monogatari, Senjougahara faces her past and her feelings towards her mother, resolving to work through them and allow someone else to get close to her once again. This being Araki. She opens her heart up again after the trauma of her mother had made her seal it off for good. She ends Monogatari much happier than before, but she has not resolved her core conflict completely, this of course being what she comes to do in Nisemonogatari. She thought she had overcome her past, but that is put to the test with the appearance of Kaiiki. He is her past personified, a person she can point a finger at and blame for the breakup of her family. The mere mention of his name makes her revert to bad habits, using violence to restrain Araki to keep him safe with her yandere ways. She is scared of Kaiiki taking him away from her too, but in a way she is just doing what she always did. Much like how she handed off her emotions to a crab, she now locks Araki up away. She is running away, not facing her problems head on. But that's where Araki comes in, not as her saviour but as her support. In her confrontation with Kaiiki, Araki himself doesn't do anything, but he doesn't have to. Him being there by her side as her strength, that is what matters. She still saves herself on her own, letting her emotions be known to Kaiiki, facing her past and acknowledging her present, but it is due to Araki that she can love her present self, because that is the version of her that he loves. It was the absence of love from her mother that was the root cause of all of this, and now Araki was there to love her in her mother's place. To be loved is all any of us really want. Kaiiki could not give that love to her, but Araki could, and Araki did. Them doing the deed at the end of Karen B being the ultimate example of this. She fully opens up to him. Even in spite of her trauma of the attempted essay on her body, she lets him in and lets them make love, no longer keeping people at stapler's length. And then to make this change clear, she cuts her hair, this being the final image of Nisemonogatari, right after Araki promises to introduce her to his sisters. Her world has opened up now. She is now being welcomed into the Araki family. The isolated princess who never let anyone get close is completely gone now. And it wasn't because some wicked prince came and saved her. No, he just gave her a little support. It was her who faced the crab, who faced Kaiiki, and faced her past. Nisemonogatari is the arc where Araki and Shinobu finally reconcile after the events of Kiyomi Vamp. Sure, she does come to his aid in Tsubasa Cat when he relies on her, but it is only here in Nisemonogatari that she actually talks to him, leading to the start of their relationship, a strange one where they are neither friends nor lovers, but partners. Both are kindred spirits, each desperate for connections and affection above all else, but due to their own reasons are unable to do this. Be it Araki's lack of self-love, not allowing himself to stand on an equal plane to others, throwing his life away for them, or Shinobu who self-exiled, not wanting others to be hurt, or more importantly, to hurt her. But through one another they find this connection they each desire, and what makes it so perfect is that they are literally connected. Araki cannot put his own life above hers, cannot die for her because of their promise. When one dies, the other will too. This connection, this vague notion of master and servant, put them on an equal plane. She is the person he is able to be most honest with, and she, now reduced to the dredges of a vampire, cannot physically escape him. Bound by his shadow, she cannot run away in exile like before, she must stand by his side. It may be due to circumstances neither can change, but because of it they are bound together, and so in pursuit of their own self-interests, is it not easier to work together? Which is what they do in this arc, with Shinobu being pivotal in Araki taking on Karen's pain and then finding her. And what does he give in return? Companionship to the lonely vampire. Obviously most of this happens outside of the scope of Nisemonogatari, so we'll not go much further in this video, but it cannot be ignored that this part, with that shared bath scene, both naked exposing all their insecurities, hiding nothing to one another, is the start of something great. The two coming together for their own self-interests and instead finding the connection they've always longed for, a connection neither can run away from or sacrifice themselves in service to. She holds him up, he buys her donuts. They are a pair of fakes, each neither a real human or a real vampire, but together they are the real thing. I've talked about this a lot in the past two videos, so I will keep this section brief, but a big part of Nisemonogatari is about Araki maturing, coming not to rely on adults like Oshino to fix his problems and handling them himself. He begins to fulfill an Oshino-like role in this part, because he now must take on the burden himself. He is stepping out of the world of childish oddities, hence why the two antagonists of this part are not oddities but humans. It's almost like this is a test by Oshino to face his fellow specialists and prove he doesn't need protecting anymore. Kaiiki challenges his perception of the world, and Kagannui challenges his conviction. Both make him face an immature part of himself, be it his black and white view on the world or his stubbornness. But to grow up isn't to simply throw those childish things aside. His stubborn refusal to submit being the reason he was able to save his sister and prove his conviction to Kagannui. In short, he shows growth from his actions in previous parts. He shows a newfound maturity, the ability to protect those things he holds dear with his own power despite what others say. To be mature is to stand by your own ideals with conviction, which I believe Araki does. And while I don't think maturing is something limited to just Araki, as it is also pivotal to someone we have also talked about in this video, Senjougahara, growing from an isolated child who couldn't even handle her own emotions, to a proud woman who can state with conviction she loves the person she is now. And well, is making love not stepping into adulthood? Is that not what the end of Karen B represented for both these characters? The two as a pair growing into adults due to love and support of the other. I don't think it's a coincidence that the final scene of this part is the two of them meeting on a beach, because at its core this part is the story about these two characters, about one confronting Kaiiki to show the conviction to love themselves as they are now, and the other confronting Kagannui to show the conviction to protect the people they love. Both winning their respective confrontations not with violence but with words, just like respectable adults. With Araki at the end of Tsukihi Phoenix telling his sisters he will introduce them to Senjougahara. The significance of this being that he is bringing all aspects of his life together, the girl he loves more than the world, and the sisters he loves more than the world. Big shout out to longtime supporter of the channel MC Steve for pointing this next point out in the comments on the Karen B video. This point being that reality is layered. In the same way as how Aragi's family are unaware of Tsukihi's true identity, and as such that layer of reality is unknown to them, such layers are unknown to all of us. This being perfectly shown through the first Hajakuji interaction in Karen B, where she phrases Aragi's secret vampirism as being backstage and his ignorant sisters being front stage. This representing insight of reality. So by involving others he may make it easier for himself, but not for them. So sometimes it is best to lie, as lying isn't inherently wrong. Nobody knows everything, we just know what we know, and unless we end up wandering backstage, is there anything wrong with us staying ignorant of something somebody else knows? In some cases it is more noble to shoulder a burden backstage so those front stage can live happier lives. This linking up with the idea of lying to one's family, an idea that becomes the most apparent in the climax of Tsukihi Phoenix. Much like how there is things behind the scene that make a play work, there are reasons behind our actions people don't know about. Aragi argues it's fine to lie to his family because they are his family. He trusts in his family to be content with just the front and not worry about the backstage shenanigans he is up to for their sakes. By not telling them of Tsukihi's true nature, of keeping them out of that reality, he may make his own burden heavier, but he will leave them unencumbered, as they don't need to know. What they don't know won't hurt them. This stage metaphor again being used by Kaiiki as he asks Aragi if life is dramatic, almost as if to explain the flavours of life, how everyone experiences a differing reality. We shape our respective worlds by what we know. Some believe in delusions, others do not. And because I'd be remiss not to mention it, MC Steve also brings us the insight that the word used for stage in the wordplay sense amuses him very much, as it is snaily. The kanji for swirl plus stad equals mai, you know, like the arc Maoi Mai. Something I didn't really talk about in the last video that maybe I should have is how Tsukihi acts as a foil for the story itself. A character with no inability to have trauma, who heals from anything without a scratch and erases any painful memory from her own mind. Considering how Monogatari is defined by its flawed characters, each moulded into who they are due to their trauma, having a character who is instead moulded by not their own personal experiences, but due to those around them, seems a little out of place. And well, she is, as she is the only character that is unable to save herself. Hence why I said previously that this is the first time Aragi truly saves someone, because Tsukihi has to be saved. Although in Aragi's mind she's undoubtedly human, could this inability to be scarred by trauma, to change and grow from one's own experience, be what makes Tsukihi inhuman a monster? This is something quite pivotal to Ononoke's character, hence her inclusion in Tsukihi Undo, but to keep things limited to Nisemonogatari, this is the only part minus Owari Monogatari where Aragi saving someone is correct. Him saving Tsukihi is pivotal in his development, in that it is him maturing into an adult with convictions of his own. So to make this moment stand strong without undermining the lesson he can't go around saving people, the person he saves happens to be the one person in the series who actually needs saving, who cannot save themselves. And whether that was intentional or not, I don't know, but it sure has paid off in hindsight. Though maybe another way to look at it is that despite being unable to save themselves on their own, Tsukihi did save themselves, by relying on their big bro. Maybe what makes us humans isn't as limited as I made it sound, though until we get to discuss Best Girl Ononoke, it's best we leave that there. So with all that said, it's time to get on to our closing thoughts, though actually before that, we have to discuss the beauty that is. If you thought anything so far on this series was a reach, then cover your ears as we've got to talk about the first ending of Nisemonogatari, Naisho no Hanashi. Now the lyrics of this ending detail the story of a schoolgirl getting annoyed at a boy for checking out another girl, saying they won't be by their side forever, and if they continue to act like this, they will just go off with someone else themselves. Which on face value seems completely disconnected from Nisemonogatari, and that's because it is. At a stretch you can say it's about Karen, since we later learn her and her boyfriend Mizudori aren't getting on well, but let's be honest, even for me, that's a real stretch. And I will admit this probably is just a song, with little to no actual connection to Nisemonogatari. Or so you may have thought, but no, I do think it's tied to Nisemonogatari, specifically to Senjougahara, and it's about her fears of Aragi being taken away by Kaiiki. No, just kidding, yeah, I don't think there's any real meaning here, but we can at least discuss the visuals. In the first version, we see the characters on either a bus or a train, with Shinobu, Hajakuji, Senjougahara, and Hanikawa, which is kinda weird as Kanbaru and Sengoku are in this part just as much as Hanikawa, I'd say, but you know, who knows. Given there's a heart in the background, maybe these are meant to be Araki's potential love interests, but that seems a little weird as Kanbaru and Sengoku both make sexual advances on him, but maybe it's because he makes none towards them. Again, this is a real stretch. Though actually, and this is off script actually, I'm pretty sure in the Wari Monogatari there's a bit where Ononoke imagines Araki's future wives, and I'm pretty sure it's these 4 characters. So maybe that is what it is, actually, now I think about it. I'm very impressed I actually remembered that. Back onto script, but if we run with this interpretation, then in the second version of the opening, we see the Fire Sisters sat down ready to eat said heart, only for it to end up in Shinobu, maybe reflecting how Araki's true life partner is Shinobu. And then later we see Araki locked up inside Shinobu, before later we see the heart with all the characters in a montage, maybe showing how he is chained to Shinobu, but thanks to her influence in Nisemonogatari, he now has formed connections with all these other girls. Honestly, as we will see going forward, although the openings are packed full of meaning, the endings really aren't so much. To not sound like I'm repeating myself too much, I love Nisemonogatari, and its focus on human antagonists over oddities really sets it apart from the arcs that came before. Although you can argue Araki doesn't undergo any grand character changes over these 2 arcs, I think this part is way more important for shaping him into the man he is than a lot of people give it credit, and is even more slept on for how much it shapes Senjougahara. Karenbi, in a lot of ways, is the second season arc Senjougahara did not get, and I think it deserves a lot more praise for how well it concludes her initial arc of coming to love her present self and let others in, with a conclusion to her arc within Nisemonogatari being extremely subdued and tactfully handled for a sexual scene. You know, by Monogatari standards of course. And is a mature ending to her arc that both her and Araki rightfully deserved. Because although Monogatari can be fanservicey and in your face, when it wants to be sincere and respectful of the moment, it certainly can. And that's kind of how I want to leave this video, and well our overall discussion on Nisemonogatari. Although it has some of the most obscene and shocking moments in the entire series, it also has some of the most heartfelt, sincere and intimate scenes too. And maybe that dichotomy is what makes me love this part so much, this story of fakes, this Nisemonogatari. And if you want to support this channel even further, then perhaps pledge to my Patreon, or consider becoming a channel member, so you can get your name at the end of the video like Hikari Desu, Rinjak9696, Mr. Sputum, and Matthias Rowett. So with all that said and done, I have been SephTheSin, the deadly sin of geek, and I'm signing out. Stay safe, everyone.